Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Dalmar. We have two very special guests with us today. Marc Gronich is the Capital Bureau Chief for the Jewish World. He's not a new guest, he's one of our regulars, but we have Assemblyman Charles Lavine from Glen Cove, Long Island. And of course you're always in Albany because we are the state capital, and welcome here to the Jewish View.
Thank you, and shalom, Rabbi.
All right, very good over here.
Thank
Marc,
you for having me.
You're the Bureau Chief, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions about what's happening in the Assembly.
Well, I'll tell you, in the past several months, I really got to know Assemblyman Lavine, and we call him Chuck, and he's the president of the National Association of Jewish Legislators, the New York chapter.
Really, I didn't know.
Yeah. So there's this, and there are 9 senators and 22 assemblymen who are full members, and then there are associate members of the Jewish Legislators Association, where they are non-Jews. Well, yeah, non-Jews who represent large Jewish constituencies. Joe Morelli up in Rochester, but you got Eric Adams, Senator Adams in Brooklyn, represents Crown Heights, and then you have Senator Parker, who represents Borough Park, and Senator Parker has the largest Jewish population represented by a non-Jew. That's his claim to fame.
All right.
He goes around telling everyone that. But so, you have this combination of legislators. I think in total of the 212, what is it, 50 belong? So 40 or 50 belong to
And we're going to have to make sure they all pay their dues this year.
Yes, that's right. So, people think of, New York State as New York City, but it's more than that. I mean, we have Jewish communities in Rochester, Syracuse, Binghamton, Buffalo, Glover's, throughout the state. So there's these legislators who now are going to focus on the Jewish views, as you will, and they will... and through the Jewish Legislators Association, they'll have a place to go. And in the legislature, we also have the Black and Puerto Rican Asian Caucus, and there's the Irish Legislators Association, there's the Italian Legislators Association.
What if you're a regular
so you,
WASP over here?
You join one of the other clubs, so. So I wanted to ask you, Assemblyman, you're from Glen Cove, which is the Gold Coast of Long Island, is that what they call it?
It used to be referred to as the Gold Coast, yes, the North Shore of Long Island.
The North Shore. And did you go to public schools there, or did you?
I went to public schools, but not on the North Shore of Long Island, but in Wisconsin and Michigan. And I was an in-state student at the University of Wisconsin in the late 1960s, actually mid-1960s, and met a very nice young woman in Spanish class who was from Great Neck. And when we graduated, she said she was returning to Long Island, and I followed her back. And to my extraordinarily good fortune, I have been married to her for over 40 years now.
Wow. Your first love and only love.
He didn't say the first love. Putting words in his mouth over here.
I do that very well.
You're not a lawyer. You're a newspaper man over here, Marc.
This is news. We're doing news. We're not doing editorial or feature.
So and then you came to the North Shore.
I went to law school in New York, and when I graduated from law school, I was very fortunate to become a legal aid attorney in the city of New York, where I practiced for 5 years, and after that I was in private practice for many years.
Well, you must have been rooting for the Green Bay Packers to win the Super Bowl.
Being a New York State representative, I always root for our home state team, the Bills.
That's right.
And also for the Jets and the Giants. But I must admit, I was very, very happy that the Packers won. The Packers are from Green Bay, which was one of my hometowns.
Right, and if you had a choice between Pittsburgh or Green Bay, obviously you'd root for your hometown.
If I was a member of the Pennsylvania legislature, I might not answer the same way.
So which committees have you been given this year?
Well, my committees are codes, health, higher education, insurance, and social services.
And are you chair of any?
No, not quite yet. But if you happen to have an opportunity to have a conversation with the speaker, you could tell him that I'd make a good chair.
And if you had your druthers, which committee would you want to chair?
All the committees that I'm on are
Oh,
very,
okay.
very interesting.
Okay.
And, you know, it actually doesn't work that way. It's not as if someone has his or her own choice of which committees the individual legislator would want. It's a matter of the seniority system, and then it's a matter of which vacancies are available. So
I've heard of legislators turning down vacant committee chairmanships.
that has happened as
Yeah,
well.
because they didn't like that topic or didn't want to get that heavily into it. And
That's interesting, and you know, one of the features about being a member of the Assembly, the legislature, that I find fascinating is that I've been exposed to an awful lot of areas that I knew next to nothing about. When I was first elected, I of course knew about the court system and justice and the criminal justice system, knew quite a bit, and I knew about public education, but I didn't know a lot about health, and I didn't know a lot about insurance. And having been on those committees, I've now been exposed, especially health and insurance, and even higher education. So I've been exposed to a tremendous amount of information about interesting topics. And each of these committees, whether they might seem at first blush to be interesting or not, are fascinating in that they deal with the needs of the people of the state of New York. So I don't know that I would be necessarily quite so cavalier as to say to the Speaker, no, I'm not quite that interested in that particular committee.
I said others were, but that's
Others
good.
were.
that
And what
you're
happened
not-
to them? Did they get better committees?
Eventually, when there was
So-
another speaker.
Well,
So I wanted to. Do you find there's more diversity in the leadership more recently than? Well, how many years are you in the
I am
legislature?
here in my 7th year
Okay.
right now.
So
and
do you find over the past 7 years that now you see more diversity in the leadership?
Well, what I've been exposed to over the course of the 7 years I've been here has been a very diverse leadership reflecting the diverse membership in the Assembly. Of course, the Assembly has a more diverse population than does the State Senate, so I can only speak with reference to the Assembly itself. But one of the geniuses of democracy, one of the great moving factors behind what makes democracy so great, is that everyone's opinion ought to count. And our conferences, which is where, which are largely, very largely closed to the public, they're almost exclusively closed to the public, are the forums in which we have a tremendous set of debates. And everyone manages to express his or her opinion, and we're exposed to the widest variety of diversity of opinion. And of course, our obligation as a legislative body is to find consensus, and that's what we struggle to do.
Yeah, I was just talking with Assemblyman Wiesenberg, who's also from Long Island, but I think
Yes,
the
he's
South
from
Shore.
the South Shore.
And he's the Deputy Speaker Pro Tem, I believe. He's like the number 3 person.
I think you may be right.
And he was telling me that, you know, he's very loyal to the Speaker. He tells the Speaker as he sees it. He says too many people in the conference yes him to death, and they're not loyal when they just yes and yes and yes.
Well, there's something to be said for that. You know, no one wants his or her representative on the state level to be a yes person or to be someone who's going to simply go with the flow or be a backbencher. But I can assure you that in our conferences, there is not only a wide range of opinion offered, but discussions become very contentious, always within the bounds of civility. In the 7 years I have been here, I've seen some remarkable debates and very passionate debates
Oh, yeah.
in the conference itself and on the floor of the Assembly as well, but much more so in the less guarded parameters of the conference.
I don't think anything was more emotional in the 30 years I've been covering the legislature than the same-sex marriage issue.
It is a very
The first time that it was passed, that in the Assembly, the first time that it was passed in the Assembly,
yes.
the tears that came out, and then the Assemblywoman from the North Country, Teresa Sayward, who came out and talked about her son, and
very, very courageous step on her part. And we have seen even in the debate that occurred in the state Senate last year, that there were senators who would have been certainly in a better political position had they voted against that bill, because it became very obvious it was not going to pass in the Senate. And to their credit, they stood their grounds and they voted their conscience. And
But
in
there
my
weren't
opinion,
the tears in the Senate like there were in the Assembly.
the first time when that was debated and passed in the Assembly, and I believe that's now, I believe it's 3 years ago, 3 years
now,
ago,
yeah.
the quality of the debate was first rate.
It was, yeah.
And the emotional impact of the debate was as well something that I will never, ever forget. And I'm very, very proud
Yeah.
to have been part of that deliberative body that engaged in debate of that quality, and that, in my opinion, cast its vote correctly.
Yeah. Wanted to ask you about the issues that impact the Jewish community. What do you see as the big issues impacting the Jewish community?
The unifying issue in the Jewish community, the legislative Jewish community, is support for the State of Israel. That is an area in which we have agreement, because the association itself of Jewish legislators is bipartisan. So it's composed of Democrats, some on the left, some on the right, and it's composed of Republicans, some on the right and some in the middle. And the area in which we find our common ground is the need to fight for dignity and respect for the Israeli people and the Israeli government, which we know must negotiate through some very, very difficult waters to navigate.
But you can't affect that outcome as state legislators. You can voice an opinion, you could pass a resolution, you could go on the record, but what about the issues on the ground that affect New Yorkers every day, that affect Jewish New Yorkers every day?
Sometimes I've heard that, the increase in trade, don't they have in New York State, like trade connections
Israel?
between Israel? I mean,
They do.
that's something
There
that
are-
could be
there are-
effective.
Yes, there are economic ties. Now, historically, this association was first developed, and I'm guessing now it's 25 years or more ago, when the matter arose of reparations for the crimes committed against the Jewish people during the Second World War. And the states had to adopt legislation that would assist in that reparations process. That was the genesis of the National Association of Jewish Legislators. Now, some states are more active, others are less active. On the national level, we are trying to reestablish an organization and a network again. And in New York State, what we have done is primarily serve as a more along the lines of a fraternal or a social organization to help expose non-Jewish members to Jewish culture and Jewish practices. And I'm very pleased to say that in the almost year since I've been the privileged to be the president, that we've engaged in a very busy program, an active program, in order to do that. And one of the things that I'm very happy to report that we have all done is to bring our community of Jewish legislators who represent the state closer to the Jewish community in northeastern New York, in the Albany area. And you yourself have been very involved in that.
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have.
Truth be told, full disclosure. And you brought a group of legislators recently to a Jewish Federation event
Yes.
at Ohav Shalom Synagogue to hear Colonel Miri Eisen.
Colonel Miri Eisen, retired Israeli Defense Forces intelligence officer, and also former foreign policy advisor and media advisor to Prime Minister Omer, who I had met in Israel when I was there on a legislative mission at the Knesset in 2006.
And I met Ehud Omer when he came to Union College in Schenectady, and he was saying, where are they taking me? He drove up from New York, and he went through, when you go through Dutchess County and
Yes.
Putnam County, and you go through Columbia County, you're like, no man's land, there's no lights on the roads. It's, where are you kidnapping me to?
Our New York geography is a little different from the geography in
Israel,
A
yeah.
few
the Middle
Israelis,
East.
you're right, that to us, 3 hours, you go to New York City, it's just a commute practically, and to them, it's like, well, you're going from one end of Israel to the other
That's
in
right.
3
Exactly.
hours. And to them, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to Ohio visit my son 10 hours. 10 hours? You're driving? Who drives 10 hours? I'm in the middle of Saudi Arabia
Maybe,
or
yeah.
something like that.
Cairo.
So it's like a whole different kind of idea.
When I was in Israel, I was very impressed with the fact that towns can be 10 or 15 miles apart. But as opposed to America, where if you live 10 or 15 miles away from another town, when you travel to that town, you're basically going through a lot of different neighborhoods, and you have people who live by the sides of the highways. It's so much more isolated in Israel. And I remember when we were in, excuse me, Sderot, and we were no more than 15 miles probably from Ashkelon, how remote the people in Sderot, which is in the south of Israel, near the Gaza, felt from the people in Ashkelon, only a 25-minute drive away.
You know, I think Brian Cole might represent Yates County, but whoever represents Yates County in the Assembly should have him join the Jewish Legislators Association, because in Yates County is Jerusalem. The town of Jerusalem, and I went there to look for the Wailing Wall, and all I found was the Department of Public Works. So
And here we sit in Bethlehem.
that's right, and we're in Bethlehem, that's right. There are a lot of, Mount Sinai is on Long Island, and
That's
Suffolk
right.
County, and
That's right.
Babylon is in
I
Nassau
once
County.
heard, you
So-
may have to research this, someone told me, and I just was heard it, that every city in Israel, like the ancient city, maybe not Tel Aviv, is in somewhere in America.
In America, yes, and most likely in New York State as well, because there are 104, more than 140 world cities in New York State. Every county has some world city, or some municipality named for some place else in the world. And I know I have too much time on my hands, I know.
Yeah.
but you really can, I just wanted to, you know, I think every city that's in Israel or the Middle East has some sister city here in New York State. We're not only a New York City is not only a world city, but New York is a world state. And, but are there, when, you know, the governor, when his budget presentation said that lobbyists are going to be running around the halls of the Capitol with their hair on fire, trying to tell you that you got to give us more money, we're going to collapse, we're going to fall apart, and he told you to stand strong. Are you getting lobbyists from any of the Jewish communities who are looking for more assistance coming to the Jewish legislators as a whole, or what do you?
Well, my experience would be with Federation on Long Island, Jewish Federation on Long Island. And last week, not only the Jewish legislators, but all the legislators on the state level, and even the legislators on the local and county levels in Nassau and Suffolk, were invited to a presentation at the Mid-Island JCC, which is in Plainview in my legislative district. And we were introduced firsthand to Alzheimer's patients who were the end recipients of a state program, and that program is in danger. So to the extent that a lobbyist or to the extent
Interest
that
group,
a
advocate.
social service provider would come to us and say, please take a look at reality, it's actually something that's appreciated, because it's far too easy and far too clinical in many ways to simply deal with the numbers and to simply adopt the attitude of a dispassionate bean counter as we parse this budget out and determine where can we spend. We all know that cuts have to be made, but if any of us believes for a moment that those cuts in the end are not going to adversely impact our friends, our neighbors, and our families, and especially those most in need, then we are deluding ourselves.
I wanted to give you some news here as we're closing up and wrapping up here. I just wanted to, came from the Board of Regents meeting, and I had a chance to interview the regent who's the chair of the Cultural Education Committee on the Board of Regents. And Roger Tillis is the name. He's from Great Neck. And I said, you know,
old friend.
The longtime friend. Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, so I said, you know, the State Museum in Albany is closed on Sunday, and Saturday, observant Jews can't go. So you're basically closing the museum down for Jews in the Capital District. For the weekend, they can only go Monday through Friday, and that's not always convenient. But the state law says you have to have the State Museum open Monday through Friday. And they explored amending the law so that it could be Monday and Tuesday could be off days and open the rest of the night. He said there's a 10% cut across the board in education this year. And that's going to mean, he says, closing Sunday is going to be a moot point because they're probably going to close the museum Saturday. And you're probably going to have Saturday and Sunday with the museum not being open. So so for a year, the observant Jewish community wasn't able to go to the museum, but that's going to, on the weekends, but that's going to be a moot point because no one will be able to go on the weekends pretty soon.
Keeping that museum open on the weekends has been a passion of my friend and colleague Jack McEnany for many, many years. And it is such a remarkable public asset and a truly admirable facility that it's just a darn shame that we cannot keep it open longer than it is, especially on the weekends.
And when I asked, he said if they had, because the New York City museums are closed on Mondays and some Tuesdays, and he said that's what they were looking to do, but then he said it's a staffing issue, having the museum closed on a regular work day, you might say, and then having staff available on weekends when everyone else is off, and they got to tend to families and things like that. So.
I am hopeful that some good comes out of this horrible, horrible economic challenge that we are trying to master now. And my hope is that in the long term, as things do get better, and they are getting better, but getting better slowly, that we will look again at governmental services and we will dedicate ourselves to making sure that we return to the day when we will be able to reach out more to help our fellow citizens, those in actual need, such as the Alzheimer's patients who I visited at the Mid-Island JCC last week, and the rest of our citizens, many of whom would love to take advantage of being able to go to the state library on the weekends. So we have our work cut out for us.
You do, and good luck with that, because that's going to be a laudable goal. You may be here many years before you see things turn around. So hopefully you keep getting reelected.
Well, we hope for the best.
Earlier in our conversation, I asked you about the diversity in the Assembly. I know that the Hispanic community has been up in arms that they haven't had representation in the upper echelons of the Assembly. Now you got Peter Rivera, who is from the Bronx, I believe.
Yes.
And he's up there on the rostrum now.
Speaker pro tem.
Right.
Yes.
So, and there are other Hispanics in major roles in the Assembly, but that's recent. That's not that's within the 7 years that you've been in the legislature.
Yes, but we have had representation from the Hispanic community in the Assembly for many years. Jose Rivera, Carmen Arroyo, and many other people as well. So it's the American political system. We all get to fight and scratch our way to the table, and I'm very proud to say that America provides that opportunity, which is not to say that it's easy to scratch and fight your way to the table.
And just so everyone in the audience knows, there's two, you mentioned Jose Rivera, his daughter, Naomi is in the Assembly. It's the first father and daughter team serving at the same time in the same house. Sometimes you had a father and son team and one in each house. This is at the same time in the same house, and they're serving together. And it's just, they're very proud of it. When they go to Puerto Rico, they're like heroes over there. He's very proud of talking about his legacy there, Assemblyman Rivera, Jose Rivera. But
and I am very proud and very honored to be a member of a New York State Assembly that is so very diverse, and in which the voices of every single Bronxer are heard.
Well, it's a testament to the speaker, because under other speakers that hasn't been so. I've been here this is my 5th speaker, and it hasn't been so under all the speakers.
Speaker Silver has tremendous respect for the diverse communities throughout the state of New York, and he has put that respect into practice, much to his credit.
I've seen that. So, yeah, much to his credit, because there's in the past it's always been I grew up in Mill Basin in Brooklyn, and Stanley Fink was Assembly Speaker, and he was the representative of Mill Basin. And you would ask him where his district office was, and he'd say the Jefferson Club. And I would say, well, how does anyone know that? It's not listed anywhere. Well, people who have to see him know where the Jefferson Club is. The people who need to see him know where to go. And I was like, well, tell me. Well, it's out of his district.
Well, Marc, you know that Rabbi Simon and I both have roots in the city of Chicago, which is known for its very civil political atmosphere and environment.
Well, everyone thinks Mayor Daley was the longest tenured mayor, or he had 25 years as mayor. We in Albany had the longest tenured mayor in the country, Rastus Corning, 41 years. Put Mayor Daley to shame. 41 years, the same man. And the first year that he got elected in 1941, he went to serve in World War II, and they kept the government running for him. So that's right, the machine at work in the city of Albany. Any final thoughts or views that you might want to talk about regarding Jewish legislators?
I think that on a very specific basis, our association will be meeting. We have no bylaws, so we're going to actually adopt some bylaws, and we're going to have a gathering of the members and determine what our policies will be in terms of what our programs will be for the year. So far, we've been quite busy. We participated last year with your help as well with Yom Yerushalayim, and the morning of the evening on which Yom Yerushalayim was celebrated, we had a breakfast at the Legislative Office building for representatives of the Israeli government and representatives of the religious community here in Albany. So we are more active than we have been in the past, and we're going to make sure that we stay more active in the future. And that's one of the reasons I so very much appreciate being able to be on this program with you, Marc, and with you, Rabbi Simon. It's an honor to meet you.
Thank you very much. It's very good that we have some good Jewish, representatives, even though it's our home time, but all Jews are representative by you, and keep it up. And even though there's not great political issues, I know, with the Jewish people, but it's good to have Jewish presence there in any case, and really a lot of Jewish values and ethics, which I could see you also caring about all peoples, not only your own district and other peoples and my other minorities. So you have the Jewish ethics pervading your whole ethics. In any case, Marc did a good job again, our Capitol reporter, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to View the Jewish View. Thank you.